you all can get to know Will. I am an old teacher, some of you know that, so I'm going to send around this sign-in sheet that says name, email, and phone number, so that we have a record of this here. And this also means that the campaign can contact you to give you more information. So
we just did a mobile check-in.
Some did, yeah.
Yeah, if you already signed in with Bobby, Bobby is Will's lovely campaign manager. If you already signed in with them, you're good. But you know, pen and paper always works best, just in case the computer doesn't work. Anyway, so I'm really happy to be here to introduce Will and Calloway to you. Some of you may know that Will and I ran in the same race a year ago when we each ran for state rep and somebody else won. But we got to know each other, but I've always known that he's in my, we have overlapping circles. We've had a lot of church friends in particular that know each other, pastor friends that know each other, and have a lot of respect for the work that Will has been doing in South Shore with youth, particularly around criminal justice issues, around police accountability, how to keep our communities safe and not over-police, how to think about public safety as a human service issue. Are we providing enough education? Are we providing enough services for our community? And this man is there every day in the streets talking to folks. So he knows what he's talking about. He has a servant's heart, as we like to say in church speak, and he's here to serve the people. And I think that Gabriel Gimanti is right here too, and Gabriel just finished running his own race. And the fact that both of us are here supporting Will means a lot, because we truly believe that he's the right person for this job at this time, and he brings a lot to this race, and he brings a great vision for the district, which he'll talk about right now.
All right.
And one more thing. I have to do this. I have to do this. Running for office costs a lot of money. People will be like, oh, you know, I can just put up a Facebook page and say a few things and call 5 friends, and that's all that we need to do. But mail costs money. Printing signs cost money. All these lovely signs that you see up and down the Midway, they cost $2.50 a piece. You know, because you just asked me how much they cost. And so, you know, just think about, you know, every time people say, oh, you know, why doesn't Gabe have all these signs up because we don't know who's running, is because every single one of those darn signs costs money. So whatever you can donate to help get signs, get mailing, get pizza for his volunteers, it helps. So think about how much you're going to be able to give while you talk, and we'll talk again about money later.
All right, thank you, Grace. So real quick, before I forget, Sheamus was getting a great deal on the $2.50. The signs I was getting was like $3 1/4.
I know.
Yeah. So those things are really expensive. Yeah. But good evening. My name is William. First and foremost, I want to give honor to God, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That's the first and foremost thing I would like to do, is give reverence to my higher power. My name is William Calloway. I'm a community organizer from the neighborhood of South Shore. I reside on the 6700s block of South Oglesby, again in the South Shore neighborhood. I am a trained community organizer, and I am the executive director of a non-for-profit entitled Christianaire. Through a few things that we specialize in is violence reduction, civic engagement, and civic policy, and also social justice. And that's something that I have been prominently known for throughout the years, particularly most notably was my work behind the release of the 2014 shooting of the 17-year-old LaQuan McDonald. I fought along with Brandon Smith, who's a freelance journalist. We fought to fight the city of Chicago to get that out. And it's just, you know, pretty much because I believe in transparency. I believe that we should see how our government is operating, not just the Chicago police, but our civic leaders as well. our aldermen. Listen, we're living in a watershed moment in the city of Chicago. And it's so many crises that we are facing, right? From police reform to the pension crisis, to quality education for Chicago public schools. So how do we fix the violent crimes that's tackling and hurting so many neighborhoods across the city of Chicago? I can't say that I have every anecdotal solution to these problems. I can't say that I do. But what I can promise is that I want to work with community members and come up with solutions that will benefit and add to the solutions that we're facing on a day-to-day as Chicagoans. I'm gonna speak a little bit as a South Shore resident. So in South Shore, as most of you know, we've been in a food desert for 6 consecutive years. 6 years, our neighbors, our seniors, our single mothers, our community, our veterans, just returning home, our community members with disabilities, none of them had access, none of us had access to fresh fruits and vegetables and produce. And this has been going on for 6 consecutive years. And so just fathom that, imagine that, right? Now imagine you sitting across the street in the office, right across the street from the Bacon Dominick's. Now you imagine yourself as me, because that's me, all right? So I'm sitting across the street from this Bacon Dominick's. This was about, I want to say, a couple weeks after Jason Van Dyke was found guilty for murdering Laquan McDonald. And you know, I heard in the neighborhood and just around the city that I should run for public office. And for a long time, you know, as Grace spoke, I ran for state representative last year, but I didn't really want to get into politics because I just feel like, oh, Chicago politics is shady and it's a unique universe. I don't know if I want to go there, but hey, to be quite frankly honest with you, I felt the calling from God, and I felt the call from our community, and that's why I threw my hat in the race. And looking at this Bacon Dominick's, looking at the quality of life in my neighborhood, it's clear as day that we have a problem with our automatic leadership. And that's just in my neighborhood, right? A lot of constituents, now I'm going to speak as a reporter to you all, a lot of constituents in my neighborhood, in South Shore particularly, we feel like, oh man, Leslie is focusing all on Hyde Park. She's giving all the menu money to Hyde Park. She's just focusing on Hyde Park, right? That's a consensus in our neighborhood. But then I get on the campaign trail and I come to Hyde Park and they like, she not doing nothing for us, right? So it just goes to show universally, and then of course with Gabriel and Woodlawn, it just goes to show universally through the 5th Ward that this incumbent is failing our ward. She's failing our wards on policies. She's failing our ward with constituency services. Anything, and she's failing our ward with improving the quality of life, like with the grocery store. And we're not even going to talk about the violence yet, but anything that you can think of, she's failing our ward, right? So I want to come to city council. I think 20 years in office is way too long for anybody. I believe in term limits. I can say right now that I promise you that I will term limit myself. This is my complete promise to you. I will not serve more than 2 terms in the city council. Not more than 2 terms. I also am an advocate for recall legislation. I believe that you should have the power. 38 states across the country have recall legislation. And they have some of the lowest corruption rates in the country. But unfortunately, Illinois and the city of Chicago does not. I believe in term limits. We should make sure and advocate that we can get term limits so we can just keep the door revolving with fresh, new, innovative ideas and new people, right? So I'm a proponent of that, right? So 20 years is too long. I want to come at this to take the same energy that I have displayed for the past several years in the community, being vocal against public corruption, being vocal against social injustice, just being vocal for my community, speaking truth to power, even when it comes to the mayor, regardless whether it's Tony Preckwinkle or Lori Lightfoot. We need somebody that we know is going to hold whoever the chief executive is of the city accountable and speak for the constituents of the Fifth Ward. And I guarantee you on today, I promise you on today, if you vote for me, that's what you will get for me. In addition to that, one of the biggest concerns is just accessibility of the alderman too. Not being able to contact the alderman, not being able to get in contact with the alderman. That's something I truly am frustrated myself with. And I can promise you on today that I will have one of the most vibrant, responsive aldermanic offices, not just on this side of town, but in the city. That's something we're coming up with great ideas right now, listening to constituents, listening to our team on how we can make response rates that much better for constituents and making sure that every order that you might put in is well tracked, well documented, and well delivered to you, the constituent. And again, that's what I promise to do. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about menu money. We talked about, oh, how Park get all the money, right? Well, quite frankly, none of us know where the money's going to, because there's no transparency. And I believe in participatory budgeting. And I want to make sure that any money that's being allocated to the Fifth Ward is inclusive, that all of us in the ward have a say-so on where the money is going to. Not only have a say-so, but we can see line by line where each cent is going to. And that is the transparency that I'm willing to offer and that I will bring to the Fifth Ward. That's something that I can promise to you. Also, I do support a community benefits agreement. I think that's very important for us to have. I think that there's a huge fear, particularly in the 33rd precinct and the 5th precinct, a little on the northern shore or part of South Shore, is that residents are scared. There's a natural fear that with the incoming Obama Center, inflation of rent is going to skyrocket. And that a lot of these community members, people that have been natives of some of these neighborhoods for years, will no longer be able to live there. And with this CBA, we can protect those people. We can protect our neighbors, and we can protect our friends of the Fifth Ward. I find it, how many of y'all was able to catch the WTCW? Okay, so the incumbent never stated that she supported the CBA. This is what politicians do. They stay in a shady gray. I'm not against it, but I'm not for it. Well, what I believe, if you're not for it, you're against it. There's no shady, there's no gray area there. And I just want to say that we need clear and concise messaging coming from our elected officials. And that's, again, something I want to bring to the Fifth Ward and make sure that all of us have a clear message on where we stand. One of the last things I want to talk about is the issue that's really dear to my heart, and is the crime rate and gun violence. And I'm a survivor of gun violence. When I was young, when I was a teenager, I was a victim of gun violence. I lost my brother to gun violence. My campaign is actually dedicated to Darnell One Step Bass. He's a friend of mine. He lost his life by a community garden in our neighborhood on 70th and Merrill. I can't say that I have every solution to fix what's going on in the world or in the city of Chicago or in the Fifth Ward when it comes to gun violence. But one thing I do know is that you cannot ignore it, and it should be treated as a health crisis. And that's how we should treat it. We should not add additional, in my opinion, because no research or data supports this, that we should continue to add more police to try to curb gun violence. That's not, I think if we really want to address gun violence, we have to get to the root issue. We have to see what's causing these young men, these young women out here in this life of crime, right? And what's making them or encouraging them, influencing them to pick up a gun. And I get it with all these, we need to focus on illegal gun straw purchases or we need comprehensive gun reform. I get that. I truly do. And I think we need tougher background checks. I get it. But I'm here to tell you all that you cannot legislate murder out of somebody's heart. You can't do it. You cannot do it. As much as it sounds good on TV and sound bites, You cannot legislate murder out of somebody's heart. If somebody wants to do something to you, a gun is just the most convenient method to do it. It's other crimes that happen in the city too, you all. Strangulations, vehicular homicides, stabbing deaths. There's other things too, but we have to get to the root. What's causing this anger? What's causing this behavior of violence? And we need to also, that's why I'm a big proponent of reopening a lot of these mental health clinics that Leslie Harrison voted to close, all right? They voted to close 6 mental health clinics in my neighborhood. That really affected some of our community members. And that's PTSD is real, right? If it wasn't for God and my good support system that I had around me, I struggled with trauma and anxiety and depression when I was shot. So it's a lot of undiagnosed people walking around our community that need help and that need resources. I need to be in a position where I can fight for resources to bring back to our community. Worldwide, not just South Shore, but whoever needs it. And that's what I promise to do once I'm elected. All right. With that being said, I want to open the floor up to any questions, Grace, Amada.
Yeah, questions. There's pizza, there's drinks, so feel free to just walk up quietly while the questions are being asked and help yourself. But yeah, let's just keep it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I never was sure how the city hall aldermanic job thing goes. But do you choose your own staff? Like if you are elected, or are they they're already or appointed? How does that work?
Yeah, see, I think on the legislative side, like in the state level in Springfield, I think some of their office staff in Springfield are already appointed, but in here, they get to choose their own. I think we have the luxury, and correct me if I'm wrong, we get to pick our ward staff and our city hall staff. Yeah, so we get to pick. So I will be able to select my ward superintendent. My ward superintendent will have, he or she would be on salary. I think it's a 90K position, and he or she will have 2 employees. And then I get a budget to hire a chief of staff and 2 more ward staffs, ward workers for staff, excuse me. And also, I'm not sure how many people you get in City Hall, but I think it's about 2. You get a legislative. Yeah.
Usually share.
But to answer your question, you have complete discretion. Absolutely. And I was thinking about that. It's so ironic that you brought that up, because I was thinking about, we're talking about inclusion. That's something that me and Gabriel was really big about on the campaign trail. Both of us together was like, every process needs to be inclusive. From the ward superintendent, from the chief of staff, because we're going to become a united family, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to be able to talk to each other like family. Right. So we need to hire like family. Right. And I believe that everybody that we hire should be from the 5th Ward. The ward superintendent right now, he's not from the 5th Ward. He's from the 18th Ward. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know that. Leslie Harrison hired somebody. That lives in the 18th Ward, and he's our ward superintendent. So when you think about why your constituency services are the way it is now, so there you have it. You have somebody all the way in Derrick Curtis Ward, he's the alderman, on the other side of town, trying to oversee constituency services on the east side of Hyde Park. So a lot of people don't know that, but yes, ma'am, I want to make sure whoever God choose, like lead me to interview, I want to make sure that it's inclusive. I sort of envision it sort of like, when the president, not Trump, we forget him, but when Barack was trying to nominate somebody and has to bring them in front of the Senate, right? For a vote, something like that. I envision it something like that, where I can bring somebody to you and say, hey, this gentleman I'm thinking about nominating as my chief of staff. I just wanted you all to meet him, talk to him a little bit, get to know him, right? And let's weed him out. So that's my plan and vision for hiring staff. And also let you know, make it completely transparent on what their salary would be. That all that it's public information now, but if you're familiar with the city of Chicago, anything you ask them is hard to find. You have to like dig for it, right? For it sometimes. But I would make everything transparent. My salary, my staff salary, anybody that's associated with the Fifth Ward office, everything will be public, everything will be transparent on our website. That's something I can promise you. Yes, ma'am.
So I had a question about the CBA. So whether or not the OPC people sign on to a CBA, there are things that the city government can do to protect people. So I guess I really wanted to hear about some of your ideas or sort of hear a commitment from you that you would try to accomplish some of those things, whether they're sales freezes, property freezes. What can you accomplish on your own, even without Obama's votes?
That's a great question. So the incumbent has voted for every property tax freeze that the mayor has ever introduced. That's the first thing. That's something I can tell you I will not do. I know with the pension crisis that people are like, oh, we got to find new streams of revenue. We're going to have to tax this, legalize this, bring a casino, all these other things. One thing that I do feel convicted not to do is vote for anything that's going to add taxes. Because I think it contributes to the exodus, particularly for people of color, that's going on in the city. But one thing that you can do with a property tax freeze, so say that the mayor comes in and say, you know, I think we got to raise property taxes, right? And then I could go and be like, well, I'm not voting for that, right? But something you can say, well, in the 60615, 60637, 60649, we put a freeze on property taxes in that area. You know, and maybe we can, I'm not sure if you could do it by precincts too, because if you do a zip code, it affects other wards as well. But if you do straight precincts, then it's just focused on our ward. And I think with the municipal power, and especially this being a home rule state, as far as the city of Chicago, we have that kind of flexibility where we can say, well, we want a property tax freeze in these certain precincts right here. And that's power that you can use. But listen, if the city of Chicago wanted a community benefits agreement, it would have it. Yeah. That's point whoever the mayor is. And quite frankly, if Leslie Harrison with automatic prerogative, if she really wanted a community benefits agreement, we could have one. That's right. With the prerogative. That's why, and if I could segue, does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, I just wanted to hear that whatever happens, you would commit to doing what was in your power.
Whatever was in my power. That's why, and to segue from that to automatic prerogative, Bill Ponce asked us this on WTTW on our thoughts about automatic prerogative, and my thoughts is like this: the prerogative is not what's wrong with the city of Chicago, right? That's my personal belief. My personal philosophy is automatic prerogative is good because it helps benefit hyper-locally the community. It is the individual with the automatic prerogative that is the problem, i.e. the adverse. Extortion, shakedowns, briberies, etc., etc. A lot of people don't know this. I said this again on WTTW last night, is that the incumbent introduced a ordinance on the 71st Street corridor. Our 71st Street corridor is a retail street corridor from 71st and Yates or South Shore Drive to Jeffrey, really to Stony. But like she introduced the ordinance for 71st and Jeffrey to South Shore Drive to down zone it.
Single family home.
Yeah, to down zone it. So it's basically saying it's zones in a community, saying okay, you need if you want to have commerce or retail, you need to have a certain zoning for it, right? Okay, yeah. All right. So what she did for 71st Street, that's specifically for retail. That's a retail zone. She introduced the ordinance to down zone it to residential. Yeah. So with that being said, with residential, every entrepreneur, business owner that wanted to come and do business on that 71st Street corridor would have to come directly to her. You, instead of like probably going to City Hall and getting clearance or anything, you would have absolutely had to come through the alderman because of that down zone.
Special use permit.
And you have to.
And it's very expensive because I work for a nonprofit and we just got one for somewhere else. It took a year and it cost about $7,000.
It's seven, you need lawyers, and see, that burden is on the non-for-profit.
Right.
I'm a non-for-profit executive director myself, that burden is on the non-for-profit or the local small business owner that's trying to start up. So then that burden becomes, alderman, I need help.
What's the advantage of, if there must be some reason to downfall? Or did she just want power? Because if you have a residential lot.
Money.
I'm asking, I
It's
don't
all
know.
about money, it's always has been. If you grease the right palm, you get something done in Chicago.
Well, I
That's what we're trying to change.
Right, she's asking something.
I'm not that stupid, stop it, I mean, is there can you still build, can you still live in a house on a retail zone or not?
No, so
You
no,
can't build it.
no ma'am, so no, there's no residential on the retail corridor right now.
That's what happened to 63rd Street, presumably.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, it used to be businesses a long time ago.
Okay, so she,
63rd is a slightly different issue.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
maybe
because
so,
of
I'm just saying,
the
that's what
Woodlawn
happened.
organization, yeah.
yeah, so this purpose for the purpose, you raised some excellent points. Thank you for bringing those up. So the purpose of this was mainly for straight power.
Okay.
And that people have to come directly to her. And what I said on WCCW, and I will reiterate this again here, things like that, ordinances like that, it opens the door for bribery, for kickbacks, for greasing people's palms and corruption. What she didn't say is that she withdrew that ordinance following the ward meeting that she had. We, the community, particularly especially over on 71st Street, we went to go protest her because we felt like that was absolutely wrong. So she withdrew the ordinance less than a month later and said, "Oh, my bad. That wasn't a good idea." Yes, ma'am.
Two things. One, thank you for bringing up the issue about healthcare, mental health, access to care, and access to the type of care that you truly need. I believe that having that care would help keep people in the community. The second thing is, I would like a group picture. We've been at the last two meetings.
I know, they come to every community.
I would like to have a group picture. I'm of the age where I realize, God, I wish I'd done that. So I'm just telling you right now.
I want to be respectful, man. Organize it. That's okay. Okay. Rob.
Facebook viewer asked a question. What is your views on automatic privilege? Should it be done away with? Should aldermen have moratorium on pay raises for aldermen when there is a freeze on city employee pay raises?
So we just talked about aldermanic prerogative just for time sensitivity. I'm gonna ask the viewer to try to rewind. I support it, but again, I think the right aldermen should have it and the wrong one should not. I personally believe that when it comes to even balancing a budget and even fixing, one thing that I have heard no one advise or suggest is a salary reduction for city council members. You know what I mean? This alderman that we have has made $116,000 for 20 years, and our neighborhoods are horrible. So it's a lot of people that are getting these cushy jobs, and they're not doing their job. And if this was a corporation, a lot of these people would have been fired, and without even severance pay. So I really believe that we should talk. I'm really disappointed because even on the mayoral side, or even people that's running for aldermen, I have not heard anyone say, "How about we cut the salaries for aldermen and city council staff? Let's start there." And some of these department heads as well. You'll be surprised how much some of these people make. Who knows the highest paid city worker in the city of Chicago?
It's the aviation.
You're so smart, we gotta keep you over here. Hey, man, I want this. She is very right. It's the aviation, Madam Aviation, I forget her name, but she is the highest paid person. Second, well, first, and then second is Superintendent Eddie Johnson, right? Who has, don't get me wrong, has a very hectic job. But still, a lot of department heads in so many different departments in the city of Chicago are getting these high pays, high salaries, and I don't know if I agree with them. That's just me. And I think that, like, if we're talking family structure, you know, sometimes we can't go on that vacation because we gotta plug this. But sometimes we can't do this because we need to start making those sacrifices until we get back to a surplus. And that's the sacrifice that I'm willing to make. Because I feel like I do Leslie's job free. You know what I'm saying? I'm just being honest.
If you become alderman, you're gonna have to address what's been happening on Halloween.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, it's gotten worse every year, and
Yes, ma'am.
last year, close to 30 cars were damaged on Ridge Court. I lived there and it was frightening. So what would be a plan? It's gotta be addressed soon because kids are already talking about it's gonna become worse even this year.
Right. So a gentleman by the name of Joshua Gray, he's also a fifth warder, and Ebony Lucas, a fourth warder. But Ebony stays in Hyde Park. Josh stays in South Shore. Both of them had contacted me around that time last year when this stuff was happening. And Karen Calloway, she's a principal at Kenwood High School. She was outside. We all met at McDonald's, and Josh called me like, you know, we need some influence outside with these young people. And we went out there, and I think the presence of, you know, adults out there sort of diffused whatever was potentially was going to happen. I'll put it to you like that. But I think that we have to take a proactive approach and talk to some of these young men and women that find out where they're coming from, what schools and what neighborhoods they're coming from, and make sure that we pull a plug on that immediately before they can even think about doing it. And work with our local law enforcement partners, whether it's the University of Chicago or Chicago Police 3rd District. Also work with our faith-based leaders as well to get them more proactive and see where's this, you know, I understand kids are gonna do kid stuff, but that is just by far just too egregious. And that's my plan. I think that we have to find out where they're coming from, be proactive, talk to them, mentor them. And
I agree with you, having bodies out there. I mean, the cops said there was 150 extra police on bicycles. It made no difference.
It made no difference.
There are hundreds of kids completely trashed whatever they could. So it just has to be proactive. And I agree with you, putting bodies out there, having people there that they're comfortable with listening to and respecting at some level, because it's all about respect in themselves and the neighborhood, and not feeling so threatened by what, you know, that they feel like they have to do that to make some kind of a statement. But it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and that's why it's like being proactive.
Can I say something about that too? So Ryan and I and a bunch of other folks are on the Teen 53rd Street project, and I think other folks have been involved too, who really want to get more folks to help. And one of the things, and Will has heard me say it several times, was that Leslie's position had always been, I don't want those bad kids to come into my neighborhood. That is her only solution, is to say that I don't want the bad kids to come into my neighborhood. And so, you know, we need to have the proactive approach and talk to the kids and talk to the teachers and get everybody involved, and also get the businesses involved too.
Just so you're aware of it if you become alderman.
Yes,
ma'am.
She had her hand
Oh,
up,
no,
rock.
there's some money that needs to be spent on the kids too. Specifically something went very wrong with the buses, so the kids were unable to get rides to get out of Hyde Park. So that's you know, besides all the like people power, there's also some money power and planning power with the buses that you might get.
And speaking of money, hold on, Rob.
Okay, and like today, I want to touch on the kids a little bit. Today I was going shopping. There was a fight at Hyde Park High School, but the police did take care of it professionally, you know, because sometimes with kids, we just cannot use profanity to them, because it's going to basically, it raise that steam up. So, and I just want to thank the police officer that was out there. I kind of stood there in the gap, just, you know, just observing.
Was the CIT trained?
I think it was today,
yeah. So the CIT trained ones in progress.
So and it happened like around 3 something, but it wasn't like real ugly. You know, the police handled it very well, and I just want to, you know, you have some good officers that's going to mentor.
So I want to, and also when she said money, I haven't said this, and then Comment had tried to allude to it the other day at our forum. So I have not received any developer contributions, any construction companies, any developers. I had a meeting with, just for transparency purposes, I had a meeting with a gentleman named Peter Castle today. He works for Mac Properties. He said he just wanted to make my acquaintance, just in the likelihood that I might win. So complimentary. I was like, okay, thank you for coming kissing the ring. Thank you.
That's on Facebook Live, right?
But you know, one thing that I'm really firm and believe in, especially, and this goes hand in hand with automatic prerogative. I want to walk into city council beholding to no one except you all. I want to go into city council I don't want to be owing favors to construction companies, to developers. I want to make sure that I'm beholding to no one except the constituents and the voters of the 5th Ward. And I pledge that I would never, from me running, from me being elected, through it, you know, if it's God's will, me being elected, and through my tenure, I would never accept any developer money. That's something I can promise you.
But she was charging that you hadn't filed your financial
Thank you for it.
disclosure.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to. Because this has been a strict grassroots effort, I think we probably had 60 to 70 donors on campaign wide. Only 4 people have gave us $1,000 or more, right? She just cannot believe that we forced her in the runoff.
For the first time.
Yeah, for the first time in 20 years. But see, and I say this in all humility, I'm an organizer. That's all campaigning really is. It's just organizing. And if you got other good organizers around you, like Grace and Gabe and other people, this is a walk in the park. This is what I do for a living, is bring people together.
So you have filed, but she's just saying you.
She's saying that, well, I hope she's saying that out of ignorance. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. She's saying that out of ignorance. But everything that we filed, again,
You have filed.
I have filed,
Okay.
where again, it was only only received $1,000 or more from 4 people. So when you do an A1 expense, you have to receive a donation of $1,000 or more, and upon deposit, you have to deposit the check. And upon deposit, financial campaign laws give you 2 business days to file it. Now, if this brother give me $50, you give me $100. If all y'all give me $100, individual contributions, I have to the end of that quarter to file all those. And me and my team keep track of every contribution that we come in. What makes it so great and makes it so easy is that it's how many of you all ever utilize ActBlue online? Never?
Like donated.
Yes. It's okay. So when you donate on ActBlue, you have to give your name, your information, and how much you donated. So all of that, most of our contributions come online from ActBlue. So all of that record is on file, right? And will be completely transparent and made available to the public. I'm a firm believer in that.
How can you and maybe some of your fellow owners of the south and west side, get more benefits for the south and west side, which need community development, the north side does everything, and, it makes the city weaker, because if you've got shabby areas, then, people are upset, the people with the guns, if they have jobs, they probably, not all of them, I mean, some of them probably do have murder in their hearts, but most of them don't. Most of them are just embarrassed and upset because they thought they were gonna grow up and be powerful men in their arms.
Right, that's great.
Because of our economy, and that's what's the matter with 90% of them.
Yeah, I agree.
And if we, I don't know to what extent, you can convince your fellow aldermen from the north side that, spreading it around would be to everyone's advantage.
Right.
It would make Chicago a much more appealing tourist, destination, for example.
Yeah, I think that's, so to answer your first question, for the south and west side aldermen, I think if they should just make me chair of the Black Caucus, and we would fix a lot of things right away. And we start there. But in all fairness, though, I think those are excellent points that you made, and I think that's very thoughtful of you and optimistic of you to say that about a lot of the people that's in our neighborhood. But when it comes to, one of the things that I really want to do when I get in office and be very vocal about is TIF reform. TIF reform, because I think to spread it equally. See, TIFs is for Harold Washington. How many people know of a guy named Harold Washington? Okay. So when he was a mayor, he brought this program called TIFs, right? And most of us know about the TIF program. There's not a definitive answer to me, and I think it needs to be some legal argument around this about how do you define blight, right? How do you define blight? Because I look at 71st Street, that's blighted. I look at Navy Pier like, that ain't blighted, bro. Like, you know, and that's the conversation that we need to have to make sure that the legal terms around blight is definitive, because it's not. And once we can start defining what true blight is in the city of Chicago, we can use and tap into the access to those TIF funds and make sure that they are going appropriately to our schools, our parks, blighted neighborhoods around the city of Chicago on the south and west side. And not for a $900 million project in Lincoln Yards, right? Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, like, there's no blight there, right? And that's my opinion. But again, it needs to come down to the legislators. I think this is gonna boil down to a Springfield issue, that Springfield has to define blight. So next time y'all see State Representative Curtis Tarver, ask him, what's your definition of blight, right? And then whatever his definition of blight is, hopefully it favors our definition. And he goes back to the state legislator and say, well, this has to be definitive for the city of Chicago, because they're using money. They're transferring $55 million to renovation for Navy Pier, put $900 million for development at Lincoln Yards. And we over here in 6 years been without a grocery store. That's not fair. And until we fix the TIF program, to me, I like to see it sunsetted and then just start over again once we come up with some real reforms. But that's how I feel about it, and I think that's how we can answer the South and West Side after they make me chair the caucus. Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple questions. What is your stand on position on gay and lesbian and transgender rights? And also, I'm curious why you're supporting, if you can speak to why you're supporting Lori Lightfoot.
Okay, well, as far as gay, I'm a Christian, so I believe in liberty. I believe that God gives you the free will to choose and live how you want to be, and I'm a proponent for that. My activism has been propelled by the biblical teachings, just no different than Martin Luther King. And I follow the practices and teachings after Dr. King. So I'm for what God is for. I don't think that government should dictate how you should operate, how you should love, how you should move. That's just my personal opinion. I think as of right now that gay marriage is the law of the land, and I acknowledge that, and acknowledge that that's the law of the land. As far as Lori Lightfoot is concerned, I like Lori. Or do you like Tony?
No.
But let me
I was just asking why people didn't like Tony, so I knew.
Let me say this about Tony. So in January, so people was asking me when I first ran, like, who you gonna support for mayor? Who you gonna support? I was like, I know Willie Wilson, I know Lori Lightfoot, I know Amara, I know Jamal Green, I knew Neil Seals Griffin, I knew Troy LaRaviere, I knew Dorothy Brown. I knew too many people. Like, these are my friends and associates. Like, I'm not gonna get in that. Y'all do what y'all gonna do. I was gonna stay out of it. Tony, in January, Tony released a commercial ad, and she used Laquan McDonald in it. And that's very sensitive to me, because this race will be over, win or lose, this race will be over in 2 weeks. What happened to Laquan is gonna stick with this city forever. And I know God used me to shed light on that issue. That's a very, very sensitive issue to me. I'm not talking as a candidate. I'm talking as a private citizen, as an individual. And I felt that was so disrespectful that she used his video, his autopsy report, And she did that because this the problem I have about it the most. If you remember, this was around the time Bert got indicted. And everybody was tying Tony to Bert.
Right.
Her poll started slipping. So to try to boost herself in public eye, especially among senior voters, she used that. And I thought that was so distasteful. And I said it then, and I'm being consistent with my thoughts then in January. Tony Felicia, as a private citizen, and I think of course I'm probably biased because of my role with LaQuan McDonald. She was not an option. And to me, she's just not an option for me because of that. Some things people do, they rub you the wrong way. You just like, that was one of the things she did. People would talk about the taxes and laying off 1,500 Cook County workers and some more other things that she did that was problematic, which, I wasn't gonna get in it, but when she did that rubbed me the wrong way.
She didn't have anything.
Okay, so your vote, so you're speaking about why you won't support Tony, but I know a lot of black activists have issues with Lightfoot and her role in police stuff. And considering that you were active in LaQuan McDonald,
yes, ma'am.
I'd be interested in your take on it and why you're supporting her. Is
So
it really just because you're against Tony, or is it because you're...
No. Lori, see, the thing about the activist community too, it's sort of like, what's an analogy I can use?
Like any family is common.
Yeah, that's true. Because some activists are police abolitionists. Some activists are police abolitionists. They don't believe that police should exist. I'm not an activist that believes that, right? I believe that we need law and order and we need law enforcement. But we all are activists. We want justice. We want the same thing. It's okay. We want the same thing. We want to progress society forward. But I look at things different. And I think a huge bulk of that is because Lori came from, I don't know her history from OPS. That wasn't my relationship. When I met Tony, she was the president of the police board. And while she was at the police, I'm sorry. When I met Lori, she was the president of the police board. And I was going to those police boards. Believe me when I say you, I was going to those police board meetings every third Thursday, every month. I know her voting record when it was time to discipline officers who displayed misconduct. And in my personal opinion, I watched her suspend or vote to terminate problematic Chicago police officers when the time was necessary. Now, everybody's not going to, see, I'm fair. That's like if somebody comes around, oh, police ain't this, they not that, it's real. I can't say that. I gotta honestly say, yeah, the Chicago Police Department have a history of torture and racism, but since I first started in activism in 2014 to now 2019, the Chicago Police Department has made some strides. A lot of activists won't say that. I'm willing to go on the limb and say that because I feel like my credibility is intact enough for me to say that. But that's where the caveat is between a lot of activist groups. And when I look at Lori Lightfoot, are they being fair, or is your biases towards the police outweighing how the potential that Lori has, right, compared to her opponent? And that's what I challenge people to weigh, right? And that's what I did ultimately. And of course, I'll leave it there. Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about opening up mental health centers, which I am very committed to. How would you do that? Where would the funds come from? So it's great having wonderful ideas, but how is it going to be paid?
Okay. Oh yeah, and it is pizza still here. I don't want the cheese to get too thick on pizza. How will we pay? Again, I think the tip for us, I think would be a great idea to utilize that. And we just have to find, thank you so much, I needed that. I think that we have to look at open the budget and see where we can eliminate some waste, where we can eliminate some fraud. But because I think to operate the mental health clinics, from my understanding, was $5.5 million annually just for one clinic. LaQuan McDonald's settlement was $5.5 million. So if you just have good policing, right, that won't cause all these police misconduct, yeah, we can probably open up a dozen mental health clinics. But it's just we have to look at where we wasting money, where it's far as that and eliminate that. And then and then of course, I'm all for city council taking pay cuts too, right? I'm all for that. So I think that's just a few options.
Well, I think that's more of a noticeable thing as opposed to a really helpful thing, because you all can't take enough pay cuts. How about revamping the pension system so you can't get more than one pension from Illinois Governmental Service?
Bobby, come on, payroll. I agree, and we had this conversation in my office before. We just had this conversation. Forrest Claypool is drawing off like 4 or 5 pensions. I think that should be legal. How are you drawing from 4 to 5 city pensions? I think that is unbelievable, and he's only one person that's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's many people, they do it in, every year, and sometimes they have an article about all the people who get 5 pensions.
That right there should be against the law.
What was her name, Bobby Steele, who, because she retired 3 months earlier to get pets for Todd's children, but she's now getting twice the pension. She's getting twice the pension she would have got.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of astonishing, you know, they give pensions because you don't have to make good on them for 20, 30 years. And then you don't disappoint your voters until you're dead. I mean, it's 30 years down the road, while retired.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we need to start there. I think moving forward to fix the pensions, you cannot, God bless you if you serve the city in some capacity as a city worker, but you cannot draw from 4 or 5 pensions. You should, that's a no. I don't think that's cool.
How about community policing on the south side? They have it on the north side. It's wonderful. It really is. Where the police actually go out and interact with the community.
Walking the beat, you mean?
No, I don't mean walking the beat. They go out to stuff like this.
Oh,
The CAPS group goes out to all kinds of, where's the senior stuff? They don't do that here.
Okay.
They don't do that in any other ward outside of the 50th, as far as I know.
I want to ask if you want to talk a little bit about informing the ward, because I think that this is related, because people do have it, people do say, why did they stop doing CAPS on the south side? As an editor of a newspaper, people call me and say, why did they stop CAPS? And I would say, they didn't stop it, it's in the calendar every week in our newspaper. But people aren't informed of it, and they're not encouraged to attend.
Wait a minute, on the north side, the CAPS program goes to the senior center, does stuff for the seniors out of their budget, no less. So they have a really nice budget. And guess what? Since I go to the senior center on the north side, I get to go to all the special stuff they do. And it doesn't cost a cent. Why don't we have something like that on the south side?
Well, the south side is a larger geographical area that I can speak for, but the fifth ward, when it boils down to it, I think it just boils down to willingness of the aldermen to push for community policing. Of course, anybody that really know Will Calloway know I come from a background of police reform, and that's one thing that we pushed was community policing. Gloria Hanna is the 3rd district commander. That's like one of the 4th commander that we have had in like 5 or 6 years. She's okay. But I think it's important, community policing is important because there was a young man named Harif Snoop Augustus, and he was shot by Chicago Police Department in July of last summer. And one of the things that happened was, with that situation was, CPD said they spotted somebody who had descriptions of an armed person, right? Which was a little peculiar for me to describe somebody like that. But what happened was, is they approached Sharif. He was talking to another Chicago police officer, somebody that was African American descent. And it was 2 or 3 other white officers. There was probationary officers too. There was rookie cops. They began to grab on Sharif, right? And because of lack of community policing, it escalated quickly. So it's escalation training and community policing, which I think work hand in hand too. He spent out, they ID'd a gun on him, one of the officers began to shoot him, and they fatally wounded him. But I feel to this day that could have been completely avoided if we had community policing. And one of the things is, I think that officers should walk the beat. I think that we should have roll calls outside in the community. That's how you increase community policing. I would like to see the officers who are about to do this shift. Hi, my name is William. What's your name, officer? You know, introduce them to the community. Let them come, because a lot of times, certain communities, especially communities of color, feel like the Chicago law enforcement in general around the country, but CPD in general is like an outside occupying force that comes in, right? When I was growing up, and we had these community charts, like on these paper charts, I forgot what they called them, but police was part of the community. As I got older, now law enforcement is not part of the community. Everybody else is part of the community. The lawyers, the doctors, the bakers, the teachers, everybody else except the police. And we have to eliminate that notion, and we have to get back to try to integrate the police as part of the community. The only way that we can do that is community policing. And I strongly feel that I am the best candidate to bridge the bill between the community and law enforcement. Because I kind of understand both sides now. I was biased towards law enforcement a little first, but I get it. Listen, I think one officer just took their life recently too, right? Just recently. About 2 weeks. Officers are human beings too. And I tell the activist community this too. Every time the police shoot somebody, it's not because they're racist. And that's something big to say, because black officers shoot black people too. You know, that's not, some people have lack of training. They don't have any cultural sensitivity training. They don't understand the community. And they're just, some of them are suffering from PTSD, right? I have to be real. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, because I was like, somebody had to break it down to me and put it in perspective. How would you feel if your occupation for 10 hours a day was to do nothing but respond to bad calls? Over and over. Over and over. Over and over and over and over. On that 11th call, you might not have been as nice as you was on the first call. You know what I'm saying? If we're gonna be honest here, that 11th call, you might not have been Mr. Friendly Cop. Like, you know, and that's just the honesty behind here. Do that mean that you get the right to infringe on people's rights and stuff like that? No, God forbid. But my understanding, my relatability is there now, because I get it. Because I know some of us live in communities where we see stuff over and over and over and over. And then by the time something happens to us the 7th time during the day, something bad happens the 7th time during the day, we explode. And that's where this thing called senseless violence comes from, which I do not like that term, but I get it, because if I trip over him, man, why you hitting my shoe? And we get to arguing, and guns come out, we shoot each other. That was senseless. Because all you know is that we got to it because our shoes collided. But you don't know what he went through all day today. You don't know what I went through all day today. That was just the tipping point. That's what it was. And this is the understanding that we have to give to our community. It's not senseless violence. Something had to add up to provoke that. Whether it started from childhood or whether it started at the beginning of the day. It's not senseless violence. But community policing would help us with a lot of issues. I'm a proponent for it. I would work. If Tony is elected, she said, I have a great relationship with Superintendent A. Johnson. Tony has said if she's elected, she's going to fire Eddie.
I'm not voting for Tony.
Oh!
I'm not voting for Tony.
I asked everyone what they didn't like about her because I was just curious.
Okay.
Because she's more famous than Lori. That's why I can't understand how Lori's there so much, because most of us don't read the newspapers.
Right. That's true. But if President Preckwinkle becomes mayor, she says she will terminate at Superintendent Johnson. Not sure what Madam Lightfoot. I guess in Tony's eyes,
But I don't, she just wants to pick her own
person. Yeah. But I said,
no, he's good. At least he looks good for everybody on TV, so when it comes out. And Lori Lightfoot said, no, she would wait, see how he does. It's quite much more of a sensible idea.
Yeah.
You see You can't interact with the person, you can't. Well, if you've never interacted with them, how do you know them?
Right.
But he has been around for a while, so Tony probably does know about it. It sounds like a defender, and I don't mean it.
I don't think he only, this would be his
I
third,
don't think he's done anything horrible, has he?
No.
this would be his third complete year, in, I believe in April, you know,
He
and
was brought in after.
McCarthy McCarthy was terminated, then, Escalante was interim, and then Eddie was replaced. I think this is third year, I think it's only right because, I'm speaking as a Chicagoan, we've grown to become accustomed to Eddie post-Laquan McDonald, right? Throughout this whole police reform we're trying to do in the city of Chicago. I think it'd be a little premature and a little bit tone deaf to replace him right now. I think that's my opinion. I think we're trying to continue to build relations between community and law enforcement. I think Eddie has been trying his best. I don't like his boss, but hey, I just want to, you know, when we have a consent decree right now that we need to oversee as well, so I think he should stay.
I did want to add one thing to that from an outside perspective. I think, and this goes to that polarization within even the activist community, is that I think you had some activists that felt it was very problematic for Superintendent Johnson to say he had, and I'm not gonna, I'm paraphrasing here, but something to the effect of he had never seen or witnessed police misconduct. Something to that effect. Right, that he had never witnessed it. So that's one thing that I think some activists felt was problematic, or maybe all.
I would turn my head to it.
And I think most people are like, you know, when you're in the police department, you likely, when you're in any type of fraternity or any type of organization, again, that deals with so much negativity on a day in and day out, that you probably have seen something, and whether you reported it properly or not, or just went to your colleague and tried to handle it that way, that you probably did see something. So a lot of people felt that that wasn't sincere. But then you had some other people, from our perspective, of somebody that's been around a lot of advocates in the city of Chicago for the past 5 or 6 years now. I will say he seems to have a lot of relationships with advocates. And so just as you know, balance out for yourself as a Chicago resident, kind of where, you know, where Eddie stands, I can't say he seems, and I don't know what it is, but he seems to have a lot of close relationships with some advocates. So, and I think that's a good thing, right? Is that he seems to be partnering effectively, especially with younger advocates.
Yeah, so this is Bobby, by the way. Bobby is my campaign manager. He has a special anointing and calling on his life for dealing with me every day. So, so Bobby is a good guy to know. But if he's not living in the 5th Ward, he won't be on staff. So don't worry about that.
He do.
Yeah, so he commutes every day.
Something actually you know, so there's a guy, Jedediah Brown, who actually appeared in front of you back in 2015 to be alderman. I was his campaign manager, so I actually have, and I used to live on 48th and Drexel, 4th Ward, not 5th Ward. But I do love this community. I remember this was a polling location. I mean, we got on a lot of these doors. We're out here, so I remember this was a polling location. And there's some fine folks in the 5th Ward. It's a beautiful place.
Can you tell me about the police training building and why that is why it is such a ruckus about it? It seems like they probably do need a new training spot, but everyone is mad because A, Rahm Emanuel thought it up, or B, we should spend the money on something else, or
all of the above.
because it doesn't seem like just on the face of it, a modern training facility might be a good idea.
Yes, but I think from an activist standpoint, this was a lot of activists that was out there protesting that. I personally would have voted against the Cop Academy, not that I'm against modernizing a training facility, but this is what I'm saying about making fiscally smart, sound decisions. A lot of people don't know is they're putting in the media $85, $95 million, but what they're not telling you is money is being borrowed. And once the interest is paid off that borrowed loan, it would be $275 million. So you're saying we're going to pay $275 million for a Cop Academy. And then on top of that, in the past 10 to 12 years, the city of Chicago, this with majority of the same city council that's in there, has issued and paid out close to $1 billion in police misconduct suits. That's not fiscally sound. I think even for this year, for 2018, there was we up at like $60–70 million just in police misconduct suits. So that's where the pushback was coming from. It was because, a lot of people, because it was for I have evolved a little bit. My petty has evolved a little bit more than just because it's wrong. But to me, it wasn't financially and fiscally sound. On top of the loss, the misconduct suits, you have to also look at the overtime that we pay police officers that are not curbing violence. You pay, one year I think we spent $110 million in overtime, and we still had the highest level of homicide rates in the country.
2016.
Not the highest.
I'm wondering if that police training thing is a big fancy building everyone's gonna look at and say, oh, that's wonderful, but they aren't changing the type of training the guys get. Or that should be, I would think.
We're doing much for the neighborhood, they're putting it in.
Right.
They'd rather have a grocery store.
Well, then, it's probably doing something good for the neighborhood. Some of them are getting jobs there, right?
Full-time? With benefits?
I don't know. But there's nothing there anyway, because I used to go to church there. And it would be not, yes, but what's wrong with building it in the west side?
How about putting a grocery store in?
Amen.
There's so few of them on the south side.
The west side.
I understand that,
Do something good for
right,
everybody.
but if you move the police training facilities to the north side because they have enough grocery stores, isn't that making the overwhelming problem of the north side gets everything worse?
Why don't they just knock down the one they already have and rebuild it on the same site?
Ooh,
Or why don't they?
I'm gonna jump in here,
Why
sorry.
don't they build a grocery store where the old one is so that there would be.
This is a discussion.
I'm gonna jump in here because Will has been standing for literally an hour and 15 minutes.
That's
I think Ann has been trying to ask
Right.
something. Okay, so I want to
I
ask
want my
another
group
question.
picture.
Oh, so let Ann have her question, and then we'll do a group picture. People can continue to have pizza, mingle, and sure we'll hang around and answer individual questions. But Ann, and then I have something else to say.
Okay, so I confess I live in the 7th Ward.
That's
My
not
little
really
line.
Me
But
too.
I am the
I'm
block
7th
club
Ward.
chair of Ethos, which is a non-traditional block club, and we definitely have members from 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 10th now.
Oh, nice.
We have 90 members, right?
90, okay.
And I want to tell them where you stand on a certain issue.
Okay.
Wearing another hat. Then I also was at a very interesting finance committee meeting at City Hall earlier this week about a homeless issue.
Okay.
I work for a nonprofit that runs the only homeless youth services on the south side.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask you 2 things, and they have a connection, all right?
Please.
So the first thing I want to ask is about the homeless youth. So there's a campaign being spearheaded by the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless,
Yep.
and it's called Bring Chicago Home,
Yep.
right?
I met with
And they're asking for, it's just over 1% tax to be added to the real estate transfer tax only on $1 million properties, both residential and commercial. So it'll be taxing rich folks and corporations and investment groups that are buying well-to-do properties, and they would only be paying a little bit more than 1% of that tax one time. And it would add hundreds of thousands of dollars to the pool that we have, that most of which comes from the federal government to serve homeless people. And the reason why this is so important for homeless youth particularly is homeless youth survive differently than adults do. And a lot of homeless youth do what's called couch surfing. They go house to house to house, and a lot of times in that process they're forced to sell drugs, they're forced to do violence, they're forced to rob, and they get pimped, okay? A lot of homeless young women become pregnant very quickly, and then when they become pregnant, they get put out again. And that's when we start seeing them in our programs, because we have a teen parenting program. And I can guarantee you that half of the young ladies in that program every day got pregnant while they were already homeless, because they were trading sex for a bed. So I'm more worried about the youth that we don't see in our emergency shelter. We have an emergency shelter, it's called Gema Village. We've had a lot of kids from the 5th Ward and the southeast side in general, because it's the only one. And we also get them from Inglewood and Auburn Gresham. And the issue there is I'm more worried about the ones we don't see because of what they're having to do to survive and what the payoff is, turning over all their benefits and then they get put out the minute they fill the refrigerator, you know, stuff like that. So, and HUD doesn't acknowledge these youth as homeless. To be homeless, you have to be on the street, living in a place that's not meant for people, all right? Or you have to be in a shelter. And so these people are going house to house. If you have a roof, you're housed, even if you're selling sex to get it or you're selling drugs. So it's super, super important that we get this passed. And I just want to tell you what Leslie Hairston did, because I was there and I saw it. They were trying to use a political shenanigan that was highly staged. The guy that kicked it off, it was almost like he was reading a script, okay, to shut this down so we would not have this go before the Finance Committee. And they were ultimately successful. But in order to get enough votes to shut it down and say, oh, it's got to go back to Rules Committee, and we can't hear it today, in order to shut it down, they had to take 4 votes, because the first 3 votes, they didn't have a majority, so they took a 4th one. Well, Leslie Hairston voted all 4 times to shift it over to Rules Committee. Now, the reason why shifting it over to Rules Committee is a bad idea is because it is a tax, it's a finance issue, right? Should be addressed in Finance Committee, and Rules Committee already said, we can't rule on this because it's a tax that needs to go to Finance Committee. So what they are trying to do is kill it, right? And kill it through shenanigans. So I just want to let you know, I can swear on Bibles that Leslie Hairston voted 4 times to kill this measure that would save the lives of a lot of homeless young people. All right? So that's one issue. And I just want to know where you stand on that. I think because you're familiar, I knew that somebody from CCH had talked to you,
Yes.
right? And where do you stand on it?
So I signed a pledge. She gave me something to sign a pledge. I support it. I think it's a great idea. I think that HUD is a federal entity, but Chicago Housing Authority needs to be reformed.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need somebody, we need someone in city council to also be a voice for that. I support it, long story short. It's interesting because when I was a former Chicago public school teacher assistant, I was an instructional assistant, a paraprofessional, that's also a seeker, whatever. I did that for 2.5 years, and the initial school that I was at was Wendell Smith on 103rd and Cottage. AUSL came in, turned around, let everybody off. Then I started substituting. While I was substituting, I was going all around the city, and I saw the disparities between so many. I saw just the inequity, right, in Chicago public schools. It is so real. It's so real. But one day, I watched a group of kids come into one of the teachers. They was from different grade levels. They come to the teacher office, or in her classroom, excuse me, and she was giving them these CTA cards. This is before Venture took over. And she was giving them these CTA cards. I don't know what she's doing. She's like, this stack is strictly for homeless CPS students. And I was so floored because it was like 40 kids that came in there, right? And then when she said that to me, I was just like, I was taken aback because I just watched 40 homeless kids just walk out of there, right? And then they just gotta find a way to get back to school or whatever, right? So I started doing more research. I did research more, and this was in 2013. And in 2012, the Federal Bureau of Investigation reported that in Chicago public schools, in 2012, they reported 40,000 homeless public. These is just what they report. I'm sure that was under, but 40,000. Wow, that's 10% of. Thank you. It's 10%. But you got to think if these are the kids, then the guardians and adults are probably likely homeless as well. And I went in front of this one, Barbara Bird Bennett was CEO, and I went in front of them like, it's homeless kids, we need to do more. At one of the monthly board, and she just completely ignored it, all of them did. But I said that to say how important, I know it resonates with me. I've been homeless before. My mother, I've been homeless before. My mother, I'm adopted, but my mother had me when she was 15. And so when you talked about utilizing sexual joints to get sleep, like, you know, my mother, she has her own testimony, right? But it resonates with me, feel me? So I understand the need for it, and I support it. And then when I get in, I will be a voice. I promise you that. I will be a voice for it.
Let me talk about the other one related. So I got involved with another issue because I started seeing it, particularly at our emergency shelter, but also at Harmony Village, which is our teen parent program, that a lot of the youth that we serve have never seen the lake.
Mm.
They've grown up in Chicago their whole life, and they've never seen the lake.
That's weird.
So, whenever I get a chance, I have a Prius. So if it's moms and babies, that means 2 babies and 2 moms, or 4 youth. And whenever we're going somewhere else, like to a speaking engagement or whatever, sometimes a doctor's appointment, whatever, I'll try to bring them and give them a little tour. We go over in Hyde Park here and look through the pines at Obama's house because the youth don't believe Obama really lived on the south side. Okay.
Wow.
Then we go over to the Golden Lady, that's what the kids call it. It's the Statue of the Republic that's a reproduction of the World's Fair, because that gives me a chance to talk about how Frederick Douglass was at the 1893 World's Fair and camped out at the Haitian Pavilion, and that whole story there, okay? Did a lot of great activism in this city. All right, so then I take them over as like the big surprise. I'll take them over to the South Shore Nature Sanctuary. So it's 4.2 acres, 4 ecosystems, dunes, savanna, prairie, wetland. It's got a nice improved boardwalk, so if they're not used to being in nature like that, it's okay. They don't have to be that close. They can go through the improved path and they can just get a nice look. There at the very end, there's this beautiful skyline view. Some of the youth have not actually seen the skyline unless it's from a train or something. So they see the lake, they see the skyline. If the weather's nice, they can take their shoes off and dip their toes in it. And it's just a really wonderful experience, right? So I got involved with standing against the Tiger Woods golf course because of saving that pristine piece of property. And the more I looked into it, and because we have now a big group that is standing against this, the Block Club started for an entirely different reason, but they have fully embraced opposing the Tiger Woods golf course. And that is because of all the political shenanigans. And probably most of you here in this room don't know that the University of Chicago plotted this all the way back in 2013. So before Tiger Woods, before the Obama Presidential Center, okay? So I just would really like to know what your stand is on that so I can tell the group.
On the golf course?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so well, I think the CBA is for the Obama Center, but I think it can also spread towards the golf course.
They have decided not to do it, just to let you know. I've talked with Jawanza and several folks with the CBA, and they're having trouble getting what they're asking for now, and they're not gonna enlarge it. And I understand that as an
But that's them as a group. I'm talking about as an alderman.
Okay.
We do a lot with policy. That's a good thing. Jawanza, as much as I respect him and Coco, as an ordinance, if I introduce an ordinance, I can legislate it and write it how I want. But I'm against it. I think that we need it's environmental things that we need to discuss about. And just I think ultimately the privatization of
right. That's the political shenanigans. That's the whole privatization of public land.
You're against the Obama Center?
Huh?
You're against the
No,
Obama Center. But you said you have 4 that are Obama Center.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. She was finna get out of here like, I'm for it.
Yeah.
I'm for it.
And the ethos group is for the Obama Center.
No, I
The
have an issue with the Obama Center.
are for the Obama Center as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's really how it's gonna interact with the community. Yes,
right.
Thank you.
The Obama Center worries me for traffic flow.
Yeah, because they plan on closing. We met with
Cornell Drive.
Cornell Drive.
Right.
You wanted to just mention your position on that?
Yeah, we met, my team earlier, we met with Brenda and Margaret from Jackson Park Watch. They came by our office on 71st Street today, and they said, hey, look, this is what we think. This is what we think should
They
be
have a pretty good plan. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would actually work, you know? And you don't have to have the roads closed for the Obama Center. It's really for the golf course.
Yeah.
It really is.
But
It's
the
for the golf course.
the point of the golf course is what? I mean, it's really bad for the neighborhood golfers, because they won't be able to afford it. Why doesn't it,
Right.
someone wants to make big money on this, is that?
Yeah, he wants to make it a PGA style golf course.
Or, is this Tiger Woods?
Not yes, ma'am.
It's not just Tiger Woods, it's a Chicago Golf Alliance, it's Ron is
University
one
of
of the
Chicago.
and University of Chicago, right?
Is this supposed to be good for us?
Well,
When you say
because
us,
that's
It's
us.
supposed to be good for anyone besides the.
Kinda depends on how much golfing you do.
And how good you are, because a pro course is not that great for
Well,
everyone.
yeah, I mean, I feel bad for the people who play golf
Right.
in the public course.
And we have golfers in our group, so.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
Can we take the picture now before everyone leaves?
I'm gonna stay around. If you have any more individual questions for me, I do wanna adhere to the member's request, so we can circle around and take a group picture real quick. What would you like us at?